I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today. Connection to country and the land is so important in the agricultural industry, and as such I pay my respects to elders past, present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today, and to the traditional owners on the many lands around Australia where our live streamed audience may be. On that note, I would like to officially welcome our audience here and online to the ACBC Australia-China Agribusiness Summit for 2022. This year's summit, while framed in an economic context, will centre on the theme of climate change collaboration, identifying opportunities between Australia and China as the food and ag sector collectively moves towards net zero. The ACBC Green Channel and Net Zero Working Group, chaired by Anthony Coles, who is in the room today. Anthony, please wave. Is an overarching framework designed to elevate engagement with China on trade and investment opportunities and to address this shared global risk of climate change. Anthony will be here for today's session, but he has to catch a flight tonight, so I recommend reaching out to him during the afternoon tea break so you can maximise your ACBC initiative by discussing this with him. As with all events over the past nearly 2 years now, and due to ongoing COVID situation in China, today's event is concurrently being live streamed, with a large part of our audience zooming in from around Australia and China and even further abroad. A big welcome to these guests watching online, and we send our best wishes to those who are doing so through lockdown. We understand your pain after going through one of the longest lockdowns in the world here in Melbourne, so our best wishes and take care. To make Q&A easy for all your attendees, we will ask you to submit your questions via Slido. The URL is in the chat box and will be on the screen for those in the room, and it's also in the program around the time of the speaker when the questions will be asked. Our moderators will refer to your questions during the Q&A sessions, so please feel free to submit any queries that might arise during the presentations. This event is made possible through the support of our event partner Coles and event supporter Agriculture Victoria. Both Coles and AgVic share ACBC's Green Channel vision with their own sustainability pledges and comprehensive strategies, and I thank both these groups for their support. The event also is sponsored by the Langham Hotel, and we do thank them for their support. You'll have seen Coles fruit and veggies up the back, as well as those from Costa. And I encourage you to please get one of the bags and fill it up with fruit before you leave, fruit and veggies, because we don't want anything left here. And we're most pleased to offer those to you as a thank you gift. As well as providing the products and sponsorship, Will Mulholland from Coles has been an enormous support and advisor to us for this event. And I look forward to hearing open remarks from him shortly. We're also delighted that representing Agriculture Victoria today is the Victorian Minister for Agriculture and Regional Development, the Honourable Mary-Ann Thomas MP. Thank you, Minister, Will Dalton, Jason Fitz and the AgVic team for bringing this partnership to fruition. Thanks are also due to the ACBC National Board Member and our Victorian Agriculture and Food Working Group Chair and Regional General Manager for Agribusiness at Westpac, Laura Mattiazzi. Laura has put in tireless work bringing this session together. You'll hear more from her on the second panel and closing today's event. I acknowledge the presence today of our President Matthew Schofield, Vice President Tom Parker and Jason Fitz from Global Victoria. Finally, I'd like to thank Andre Jacques, Director of Sales and Marketing at the Langham Hotel in Melbourne, who's responsible for the in-kind venue support and for this beautiful room we're sitting in today. We appreciate your generosity as a member of ACBC, and I'm delighted to invite Andre to officially welcome guests directly after these remarks. Just a little housekeeping. Andre is in here, is he? Yes. Oh, good. Oh, thanks, Andre. Good. Just while you're coming to the stage, we'll just do some quick housekeeping. A copy of today's agenda is on your table. And for those watching online, a copy is in your email. The document has the running sheet for today and the detailed information on our speakers. So to save time, we encourage you to read the bios, and therefore we'll be able to give brief presentations. The toilets are just out the back and to the left, to my left. And also remember, please, to submit your questions via Slido. It's now my pleasure to pass over to our good friend Andre Jacques to provide welcome remarks, after which we will have a short video from Coles and then a few words from Will Mulholland. Over to Andre. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Again, welcome to the Langham Melbourne. We're absolutely delighted to have you all here today for this meeting. We've been a long-time member with the Australian-China Business Council, and again, we're delighted to be involved again in 2022. The Langham Melbourne, we've been voted the #1 city hotel in all of Australia, all in New Zealand in 2021. So we were delighted to win that award, and that's for both obviously a business hotel, but very much a leisure hotel as well. And then speaking of the Chinese market from a tourism standpoint, I realise that you're here from many other industries. The China market represents, obviously for tourism here in Australia, it's a very significant market. It's the #1 inbound market in normal times. And I've just returned from an industry conference in Adelaide, the Australasian Hotel Industry Conference, where many CEOs from various hotel groups obviously get together. And a big topic on day one of the conference was actually the Chinese market and to be Chinese ready, because they did reference that obviously when the Chinese market does come back to Australia from a tourism standpoint, it's going to be a very fast acceleration and past levels that we've seen before in this country, which is very positive for everyone. But again, I just wanted to welcome you here this afternoon. All the very best for a successful and productive meeting, and enjoy. Thank you, Virginia.
For more than 100 homes.
Good afternoon, and thank you to Virginia, to Laura, to Zach and the ACBC Organising Committee, our speakers and panellists, and to all of you who have joined us here in Melbourne and online from Australia and China for the Australia-China Agribusiness Summit on Climate Change and Sustainability. The short video just presented highlights Coles Group's sustainability strategy. Sustainability has been an explicit part of our corporate strategy since 2020, with the simple mission to drive generational sustainability, acting together now for generations ahead. Sustainability supports our corporate vision and purpose, and we believe that through our strategy, we can create momentum and activate change. Being one of Australia's largest companies, we have a role to play to lead industry and businesses on their sustainability journey and to create pathways for others to follow. Because succeeding in our mission will require levels of collaboration and engagement well beyond the boundaries of our traditional business. It's this same collaboration and engagement that brings us here today. The guest speakers and panelists we will hear from are experts in their fields in agri-emissions, trade, technology and innovation. And we have strong representation from across Australia's and China's business community. We all need to work together to action sustainable change. It's important, just the next slide, thanks, Zach. It's important to have a clear statement of ambition that is public and for which we are accountable for at Coles. And that statement of ambition is to be Australia's most sustainable supermarket. We have two focus areas. The first is Together to Zero, which is targeting zero emissions, zero waste, and zero hunger. Together to Zero acknowledges our responsibility to minimise our environmental footprint and to show leadership in protecting our planet, climate, and resources. Together to Zero emissions sets out our bold greenhouse and climate ambitions. Together to Zero waste recognises our role in reducing waste and working with industry partners and suppliers to conserve valuable resources. And Together to Zero hunger aligns completely with our core business as a food retailer. We love food and we don't want to see it wasted. It encompasses our commitment to donate unsold edible food to food rescue organisations and includes the support that we provide in times of need, such as providing funds and food as part of disaster relief. Our second focus area is Better Together. Better Together sets out our ambitions as to how we will work with our stakeholders to drive positive change. It acknowledges that Coles alone cannot solve the environmental and social challenges that we face, and that we must work collaboratively to help drive our sustainability agenda. It has a big focus on team, with 120,000 team members across Australia and a small team in China. With community, more than 2,500 supermarkets, convenience stores, liquor stores across Australia, it is important that we invest in all of those communities. And with our suppliers and farmer base, we have more than 3,000 suppliers across Australia providing fresh food products to service our 21 million customer transactions each week. Highlighted here are just some of our achievements at Coles. All of our renewable energy electricity agreements are now in place to meet our 2025 target for 100% renewable electricity. 81% of solid waste, predominantly food waste, has been diverted from landfill. 2.2 billion pieces of soft plastic have been collected through the Red Cycle in-store recycling program since 2011. Thanks to Australians returning over 1 million pieces of soft plastic every day. This plastic is recycled and has been produced into more than 250 different products, from fence posts to furniture to shirts, and more recently into concrete and roadway mixtures. An exciting development in this space is a collaboration between Red Cycle, the transport company Downer Group, and a startup Close the Loop, who have developed a product for use in asphalt for road construction. And by adding a recycled polymer to the roads last longer with less cracking. And it was most recently announced that this product will be used in the upcoming upgrade of the M80 ring road around Melbourne. And at the end of its useful life, that polymer is completely extractable and will be recycled and reused again. So this is an incredible example, I believe, of the circular economy and bringing players together from across vast industries to repurpose and recycle food packaging. We bring our sustainability strategy to life across the business, including through our stores. Launched in March 2021, our Sustainability Innovation Supermarket in Moonee Ponds, Victoria, is designed to set a new standard in supermarket sustainability. We aim to launch one innovation store a year, and we measure innovation on customer experience and sales, on operational efficiencies and profit, and for the first time with this store, the third pillar of sustainability. There were 69 innovations trialled in this store, and more than 60% of those have been incorporated into our store blueprint, which is the basis for all of our new stores. Green Alley, on the top right-hand corner of the slide there, it's a great example of how we're trying to tackle the food waste challenge. There is a trade-off between packaging and plastic and food waste. And here in this store, we've invested in misting and cold plates to keep food fresher for longer and at the same time remove packaging on a wide range of fresh produce. We introduced refill stations into this store to dispense laundry soaps, detergents, body wash, hand wash. 96% reduction in plastics when using these refill stations versus standard product. The trolley baskets in this store are all Australian made, from 90% recycled milk bottles and 10% soft plastic through the Red Cycle program. Refrigeration. There are two innovations here in this store. First, we've installed doors on all the fridges in the store, which for those of you who don't like the cold temperatures walking through the aisles, it is a massive difference. The whole store is lovely and warm and convenient. But secondly, we've upgraded all of our fridges with a natural refrigerant solution. So there's close to no global warming potential on those fridges. We've also linked sustainability in this store with a partnership with the local school to donate funds to enhance their program on the Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Garden program. What next on emissions? When we look at our combined Scope 1 and 2 emissions and Scope 3 emissions, we find it is the Scope 3 emissions which occur more broadly in our value chain that are by far the largest. So our step right now, we are working to define our Scope 3 inventory and boundary and measure our baseline so that it will then support our intention to release a Scope 3 target. This is complex work, as to impact those Scope 3 emissions will involve significant consultation and action within our extensive supply chains. But this is all part of our Together to Zero emissions strategy. A great step forward for us in this space came with the launch last month of our certified carbon neutral Coles Finest beef range. We secured the carbon neutral threshold by working with farmers to measure and reduce their emissions through increased renewable energy, carbon storage through pasture and reforestation, changing herd management practices, and more efficient reproduction and growth with genetic selection and improved herd health. The emissions from this farming group are 19% below the current national average, while the remaining carbon that was unable to be abated has been offset with the purchase by Coles of Australian carbon credit units. Similarly to climate change a few years ago, we're now seeing an increased focus on nature and diversity. The Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures will release its nature-related risk management and disclosure framework in 2023. There is also the COP15, which is the Convention on Biological Diversity, which started October last year and is being led by China and is ongoing. It will be the most important biodiversity convention in a decade and will be the main international agreement for countries to collectively manage diversity of life on Earth. There is the World Benchmarking Alliance developing its nature benchmark, which will assess 1,000 leading companies globally to their 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and Coles is one of those 1,000 companies to be assessed. So as you can see, sustainability is important for Coles, and I'd like to ask of all of you as we begin today that the dialogue that we start here continues and builds into strong collaborations across this community. Thank you.
Do we have the Minister online, Zach? Yep, okay, fine. I'll just hand over to the Minister. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Virginia, and thank you, Will, for that really terrific presentation. It's great to see large corporates like Coles really taking meaningful action on climate change. So congratulations to you. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are all gathered. I'm joining you today from Wurundjeri country, and so I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I would also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge any Aboriginal people who may be joining with us today. Can I also acknowledge that we are joined today by Mr. Long Joe. Of course, Mr. Long is the People's Republic of China Consul General to Victoria, so it's great to have you joining us, Mr. Long. But to all of the participants and to the Australia-China Business Council, can I congratulate you on this very important meeting today. Climate change is without doubt the greatest challenge that our agricultural industries are facing right now. We're only going to get real solutions if we work cooperatively together. And this event is a clear demonstration of that commitment to work together, not just business to business, but nation to nation. Each country is experiencing climate change differently, with different pressures on people and economies. And because of this, it's important for us to continue the dialogue that we are having, like that we are having today. Of course, farmers are at the forefront farmers are on the front line when it comes to experiencing the real impacts of climate change. And I think we can all agree that climate change is no longer something that may be considered as something that is going to happen. We are living with it right now. And across our nation, in agriculture, our food producers and others within the food supply chain are dealing with some of the impacts of climate change, be they frequent and extreme bushfires, storms, droughts, floods, the number of extreme weather events that we've had that play absolute havoc, not just with our primary producers, but as I said, with the supply chains that they rely on. Now, businesses are, of course, being impacted in many different ways, and climate change means new challenges and pressures on our business community. What business needs from government is clear policy direction. Here in Victoria, we are very proud that we have set targets to achieve net zero emissions economy by 2050 in line with the Paris Agreement. We are one of the first jurisdictions in the world to legislate a net zero emissions target with our Climate Change Act of 2017. So there is no wiggle room here in Victoria. We have a target and we are focused on delivering it. And that, as I said, gives clarity to business and to farmers working here in Victoria that they know the policy environment in which they are working. So our strategy here in Victoria is based on reducing emissions while creating jobs, stimulating innovation and research, and reducing costs, particularly for our farmers. The ag industry must play a significant role, not only because, as I said, farmers are at the front line when it comes to experiencing the impacts, but because, as we know, agriculture is the fourth leading emitter of greenhouse gases here in Victoria. So it's a big challenge for us, but one that we are absolutely up to. And I was delighted that last year I was able to announce $20 million of investment in foundational work under our agriculture sector pledge. This is part of a whole of government approach to reducing emissions. So across government, we are looking at the emissions that we can control, particularly say public transport, for instance, and those that we can work with industry to support how we can drive down those emissions. So this investment is focused on groundbreaking research, new technologies, pilot programs and practices to help farmers reduce emissions. While, I might say, very importantly, while maintaining or indeed growing productivity and profitability. Now, I take any opportunity that I can to visit our smart farm, AgVic's own farm, Ellenbank, in Gippsland. Ellenbank is focused on the dairy industry. And the research that happens at Ellenbank is absolutely world leading. It is on track to become the world's first carbon neutral dairy farm by 2026. And it serves and operates as a demonstration site for the entire dairy industry. Every time I visit, I learn something new. So the farm, of course, includes sensors that measure grazing parameters, milk harvesting and supplement use, cameras that measure animal welfare parameters, and drones that take pasture measurements. A state-of-the-art water treatment plant provides drinking quality water via a gravity feed system, while solar power reduces energy demand on site. At Ellenbank, we have invested $3.9 million in flagship trials in pasture-based grazing systems to test two very promising methane inhibiting feed additives, and of course, including one made from seaweed. And of course, as many of you will know, it's methane that is the holy grail. If we can crack that, then we can be assured of a very strong future for our dairy and beef cattle industry. So we need to do this work, and we need to keep supporting our beef and dairy farmers to help them unpack and understand the impacts that their livestock have, but the action that they can take on farm to play their part. And can I again congratulate Coles on the work that they're doing with the beef cattle. So obviously one of the key challenges for our farmers is really understanding what's happening on their farm. So we are working to make sure that farmers have tools and information that is readily and easily used by them. We're investing $10 million of that $20 million to on-farm action plans as part of a pilot program. So we're going to provide up to 250 farmers with on-farm emissions profile assessments. So you will all know that you need to, you can't change what you can't measure. It's very important that we give farmers these tools so that they can understand what it is on their farm, what farming practice, what machinery and so on that they're using that might be driving their emissions. And then we will work with them on some of our emissions reduction ideas, strategies, technologies. We're also developing an agriculture climate spatial tool, and that will enable farmers to use current and highly localised data to help them better adapt on future climate change scenarios. The Victorian Carbon Farming Program is another one of our initiatives. It's a $15.3 million initiative to support farmers and landholders consider the role on-farm revegetation, plant shelter belts and investments in agroforestry could play in their farm enterprise. And indeed, when we think about where the real potential is to reduce on-farm emissions, then tree planting, agroforestry will and must play an increasingly important role. Of course, having said all of that, we understand that we're asking farmers to make trade-offs with their available land, and I'm very cognizant of that, and hence why we are putting money behind that initiative. But also we need to continue to work with farmers and talk with them, listen to them about their long-term aspirations for their farm, with so many farms, of course, being intergenerational enterprises here in the state of Victoria. Energy use, we have invested, our government has invested $60 million in our agriculture energy investment program. This program has been hugely successful because what it has done is support farmers to reduce costs on their farm associated with energy production. So we've supported our farmers transition technologies that they may use and indeed to look at their electricity supplies to support them to become more self-sufficient, to invest in renewables, invest in new technologies on farm to cut their energy bills and, importantly, cut their on-farm emissions. I know that today is all about collaboration and climate, and the Victorian Agriculture and Climate Change Council is a great example of government working with industry to boost our knowledge of the issues on the ground and to increase industry-wide adoption of low emissions targets and broad-scale uptake of technology and research. And I'm indebted to the work of my council that advises me. We have seen such top quality work come from the council, and importantly, it's coming from people who live and breathe agriculture, who are committed to real action on climate change. They live and breathe this every day in their work. So it is a council that includes farmers, industry leaders and climate change experts. Now, in closing, can I just once again reiterate, we know there are a lot of challenges in front of us, and the last 2 years have shown us, as we have worked through the COVID pandemic, we've discovered how fragile so many of our supply chains are. And indeed, I've spoken to many in business and industry who have said to me that, you know, having relied on and worked within a just-in-time framework for so long, that was a framework that was really exposed as wanting when it came to operating within a pandemic environment. And I think we all know, and certainly the Chinese people know, that we're not out of the pandemic yet. We await winter here with some consternation, but of course now with vaccines, that has really enabled us here in Victoria to once again open up and restore some normality back to our lives. But we've got to keep investing in research and in COVID and so on to ensure that we can stay on top of this mutating virus. But as I said, it has exposed some weaknesses in the system. And that's why relationships remain important at all times, and that we very much value our relationship here and through the Australia-Chinese Business Council with the people of China. We have developed people-to-people links, which I'm very proud of. And of course, we've got systems in place to help us weather storms, such as COVID. I think we need a word beyond storm to describe COVID, but we are continuing to see Victoria's premium products on supermarket shelves in China, and we want to continue to do so. And in a first for our state, we have established Vic House in Shanghai. It's a Victorian food and fibre trade pavilion, and I had the pleasure of opening Vic House, but I did it virtually. I look forward to being able to visit it one day in the future. But Vic House provides an opportunity for Victorian agriculture producers and exporters with a dedicated in-market space to showcase their products. And importantly, with a commercial kitchen so that we can bring some of our, or take some of our favourite recipes using some of Victoria's best produce to the people of China. Vic House also provides Chinese buyers a place to try for themselves our world-class produce, our wine, cheese, beef, and of course seafood straight from Victoria. So we know here in Victoria that Chinese consumers are sophisticated and discerning. They're informed about where their food comes from, and we want to continue to build a direct connection and support the export of our premium produce to China. Now, I think, again, we can all agree that predicting the future is not straightforward and perhaps not something that I want to pretend to do. But I think one thing that we can be certain of, that building and continuing to strengthen relationships through thick and thin is something that will stand us all in good stead. I want to thank again the Australia-China Business Council for hosting this very important conference today, and I look forward to continue to working with you and to all of the guests who are joining us today to ensure that we continue these terrific relationships with the Chinese people and that our agricultural industries are able to be showcased in the People's Republic of China. Thank you very much.
Sincere thanks to the Honourable Mary Ann Thomas MP, Victorian Minister for Agriculture, and thank you very much for emphasising the relationships, because that's at the core of everything that we do at ACBC. So we really look forward to working with you closely over the coming weeks, months and years. So thank you very much for your presentation. I now have the pleasure of introducing video remarks from the Chinese Consul General to Melbourne, Mr. Long Zhou. ACBC Victoria has maintained a long and stable relationship with the Chinese Consulate in Melbourne since we were founded in 1973. And we thank Mr. Long Zhou, the Economic Councillor, Mr. Bian Zhang, Ms. Sun Min, and all those at the Consulate for their hard work and for providing support in connecting us with such valuable speakers from China for this event. So if you would now watch the video from Mr. Long Zhou. Thank you.
Honourable Mary Ann Thomas, Minister for Agriculture and Minister for Regional Development. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings to all. It's my great pleasure to address the Australia-China Agribusiness Summit. Let me thank ACBC Victoria for her efforts to organize the summit. In recent years, the intensification of global climate change and frequent natural disasters are posing severe challenges to the ecosystem. Humanity is faced with an important choice of achieving global green and sustainable development. In the face of ecological challenges, all people are members of a community where they rise and fall together. No country could be spared. As early as 2015, President Xi Jinping proposed the New Development Philosophy, which highlights innovative, coordinated, green, open, and shared development. In the new development philosophy, green development is a must for sustainable development and an important embodiment of people's pursuit of a better life. And it is also a significant approach to tackle the climate change. The conviction of lucid waters and large mountains are invaluable assets, forms the theoretical basis for leading China towards green development. This conviction takes full account of people's aspirations for a better life, expectations for a good environment, and the responsibilities to future generations, and also stimulates in-depth exploration of synergies in protecting the environment, developing the economy, creating jobs, and eliminating poverty. In the 75th United Nations General Assembly in 2020, China announced that it will peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. This means that China, the largest developing country in the world, will achieve the highest reduction in carbon emission intensity in the world and achieve carbon peaking to carbon neutrality in the shortest time in global history. It is not easy work for China, but as a trustworthy and responsible country, we will deliver what we promise. China has been growing all out to achieve the target. Data in October 2021 shows that China's carbon emission intensity in 2020 has dropped by 48.4% compared with 2005, exceeding the target of 40% to 45% reduction by 2020 as promised to the international community. The cumulative reduction of carbon emissions is about 5.8 billion tons, which reversed the rapid growth of carbon emissions. China has become one of the countries with the farthest reduction in energy intensity in the world, demonstrating its determination to reduce carbon emissions with practical actions. At the 26th Conference of State Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change held last year, the Chinese side put forward 3 proposals, mainly focusing on maintaining multilateral consensus, concentrating on practical actions, and accelerating green transformation. These proposals has provided China a solution on how to deal with climate change and promote the recovery of world economy. They fully demonstrate the positive and the constructive role that China has played in the multilateral process of combating global climate change and has won wide acclaim from the international community. Ladies and gentlemen, agriculture is probably one of the areas most vulnerable to climate change. The vast majority of global agriculture production, especially food production, is directly controlled by climate factors and climate system. Facing unprecedented challenges, agriculture, which relies on the weather for harvest, is one of the industries that will inevitably be hit by the hardest, and the food security bears the brunt. Therefore, how to feed more people with less resources and be able to provide more nutritious food is a severe test for the world. Green is the base color of agriculture. Under the guidance of the new development philosophy, China highly values the green development of agriculture and has successfully taken a series of actions to build climate-resilient green agriculture, combining green development with addressing climate change to form a new agricultural development model. The plan for green development of the agriculture sector over the next 5 years, which was jointly issued by the 6 departments, including the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs last year, is the first special plan for agricultural green development. The landmark plan identified resources protection, pollution control, restoration of agricultural ecology, and the development of a low-carbon agricultural industry chain as the key tasks for the 14th 5-year plan period. Ladies and gentlemen, both China and Australia are big agricultural countries. Both countries have their own strengths in the field of agriculture. Protecting natural resources, maintaining the ecological environment, and developing sustainable agriculture are our common goals. Victoria is Australia's largest producer of food and fiber products, which makes up over half of Victoria's total product exports. Victoria's GVAP represents 29% of Australia's GVAP. 146,600 employees in agriculture production and food manufacturing of Victoria, the largest number of persons employed in agriculture and food industries among all states and territories, contributes over 28% of agriculture and food employment in Australia. These numbers are amazing. I believe all of you are very proud of that. Victoria is also at the forefront of agricultural development strategies. The 2030 Victoria Agricultural Strategy positions Victoria as a leader in low-emission agriculture, and the states committed to the theme of innovation, recovery, growth, modernization, and performance agriculture. Over the past years, the Chinese Consulate General in Melbourne has maintained close cooperation with the Victorian government, Global Victoria, VCCI, and ACBC Victoria. In our video conference with Minister Thomas in last November, I said that although the cooperation between China and Australia is currently affected by factors such as the epidemic, but the basics of our partnership remain the same. The potential for cooperation between enterprises is still there, and Victoria's enterprises are actively participating in the CIIE and Canton Fair. Vic House, proposed by Minister Thomas, was officially opened in Shanghai last year, introducing high-quality products from Victoria to the Chinese market and bring Victorian enterprises and the Chinese customers together. This is a great initiative. I was told that the launching ceremony of Twin Garnet Plum held at the Vic House in February was positively received. I'm very happy that this Australian super fruit has been welcomed by the Chinese customers. On this occasion, I wish to express my heartfelt thanks to all the friends for your valuable contribution in promoting trade between China and Australia. And I hope that our cooperation in the fields of climate change and agriculture could also blossom and bear fruits, just like that super fruit that's contributing more positivity to the early turnaround of the overall relations between our two countries, which I believe will definitely bring our trade and economic relations to a new level. Ladies and gentlemen, right now, changes of the world, of our times, and of history are unfolding in ways like never before. These changes are posing challenges that must be taken seriously by humanity. Multilateralism, free trade, and international cooperation is the only way to solve current problems and to overcome future challenges. We should further open up, not close up. We should remove barriers, not create them. We should seek integration and avoid decoupling. In a world in COVID-19 and beyond, let's work together to build greater synergy through win-win cooperation. Let's work together for the climate, for the global development and the shared future. As the famous Chinese saying put it, when people pull together, nothing is too heavy to be lifted. To conclude, I wish the summit a great success. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that message, Consul General Long Zhou. We're grateful to you and your staff at the consulate, many of whom are online today. We now enter the first theme of the summit, the big emitter, Agri's methane reduction plan for net zero. And before I introduce our first speaker, there will be opportunities to ask questions of our speakers and panelists. So we're using Slido. Those of you who know Slido or don't, just Google Slido, S-L-I-D-O, like I do, and click on the link. And then we're using the code AUSCHINAAGRI, all lowercase, one word, AUSCHINAAGRI, and it should pop up there on the link for you. And please use that to ask questions. So already well known to this crowd, I'm delighted to introduce a very special speaker to the stage. Mark Allison is Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Elders, a name that should be known to most here. Elders has been a leading agribusiness leader in rural Australia since the 1830s. And with over 40 years in the industry, I welcome Mark Allison to deliver his keynote presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Will, and thank you for the invitation to come here today. I just wanted to triple check with everyone. You're happy for me to be here in person, or do you want me to go in the other room? I can come in by Zoom if you want me to. The subject that I've got to talk about are the climate change credentials of agriculture, and where this can this be a bona fide position for agriculture. To ask me to talk about agribusiness and the noble and honourable progress we've made through thousands of years feeding the populations around the world is to ask me to do something that I love. Agriculture is sometimes misunderstood, particularly in metropolitan areas of Australia. The contribution of agribusiness to the total economy, the contribution of the regional rural communities, and the importance and significance. In the last week, as I'm also chair of Agribusiness Australia, and in the last week we got 30 of the leading agribusiness CEOs from Australia together to talk about a few issues, but we identified the two key issues from a pre-survey, and that was one was around ESG, sustainability, and the second was around labour availability. And it was just quite amazing on Tuesday morning to have all of the big hitters of Australian agribusiness saying, listen, we are consistently and overwhelmingly committed to the targets, to continually improving our position, to have a sustainable, profitable, and the productivity that comes out of all of these new technologies approach to agribusiness. So it was super exciting. But with that in mind, when Laura talked to me about speaking today, I thought that, and seeing the agenda, how the agenda is laid out, or the program's laid out, I thought I might go to a report just to give a different perspective around the sustainability issues, as Will touched on with Coles, but also the various views, drivers and transitions over the year. So if you look at the cover slide and the commitment that came out of some work that we did a couple of years ago, this is the report on the implications of changing community expectations on agribusiness. So the idea was that this isn't about being dragged into a new world. That there are changing attitudes and views across the world, across Australia, across the city, across the country, and understanding what that means for agribusiness in Australia. So if we go to the next slide, the way I thought I'd just try to remove some blocking this. Can't remove it. I got it. I thought just to set that context, I've pulled a number of charts out of that report just to give you a sense of the journey of trust, what's actually been happening, and how there's a strong acknowledgement that there's a long way to go. So if we go through to the next slide, the first one was to try to understand the industry context and where agriculture fits in the scheme of all the industries in terms of environmental risk and social risk, and that. I trust that that's big enough for you to see. But when you cut through on it, if you go agribusiness and commodity foods, aggregate risk score is at level 8. But you can see a bunch of other industries there. The issue, I think, for agribusiness, and to be able to have that business card of climate change leading and sustainability leading, we've got ambitious growth ambitions throughout agriculture in Australia. Pre-farm gate, 100 billion by 2030. Post-farm gate, another 200 billion. So 300 billion growth by 2030. And we want to do that in a way that meets all the sustainability objectives and in a commercial way as well, so that it is sustainable on all aspects. So looking at the ambitious growth aspirations, increasing standards across social and environmental, we actually don't see that as an impediment to growth across agribusiness. What we see it is reality, and what agriculture's been confronted with the whole history of agriculture. Issues occur, you respond, you adapt, you innovate, and then you move to the next issue. And I've got a slide later on showing some of that. So we go to the next slide. So each of these, I'll just spend a couple of seconds on just to set a flavour, and then open it up for questions later on. The influences in agribusiness, and you can see the impacts and the facets of impact on agribusiness. Yeah, for me as a CEO of a publicly listed company, I've got proxy advisors, shareholder association, people who investors, super funds, the whole gamut on the financial scale, talk to me about stuff in agriculture that they know nothing about, but they've got a checklist and little boxes, and they tick and tick and tick, and you're either good or you're bad. So that's just one area, and I'm obviously taking an extreme position for the view, but there's other areas. There's special interest groups. There's media. There's there was as a live example yesterday, a farmer in Narrogin in Western Australia spotted a label on his atrazine that was a simazine booklet. So it's obviously got mixed up and been put on there accidentally. So a simple mistake. How many tonnes? 1,000 tonnes of simazine across that area. So he took a photo of it, put a circle around it, and put it on social media. But how could someone make a mistake? So one mistake and suddenly the whole world comes crashing down. But I think we're all aware of the multifaceted impacts, the interrelated areas. It's across all supply chains, across all influence chains. We're seeing a federal election run in different colours now with this multifaceted, multidimensional perspective, and it happens really quickly. And the Rio Tinto example from a couple of years ago was a good example. So if we go to the next slide, in terms of the journey of trust, and this is where I'm most proud of agribusiness and agriculture. So we've got the key areas of sustainability that are largely invisible to the metropolitan audience and also latter day audience from the 70s. You can go back to the 50s with chlorinated hydrocarbons in the food chain, which as soon as agriculture were aware of it, took the products out of the food chain, adapted, innovated, got different options. We've got through the 80s and 90s where I came out of uni as a research agronomist, and we had dust storms in Melbourne and Sydney from all the marginal broadacre farming land being ploughed to death with all the recreational tillage that was occurring at the time. And and the little ag scientists, we were out there driving zero-till conservation tillage, replacing multiple cultivations that destroyed the organic matter in the soil, destroyed the worms, had significant runoff, had dust storms, and replacing with better technologies. And then, then those technologies were replaced with better technologies. So I was an agronomist in Moree at that time, just after that time, and there were 28 sprays of insecticides going over cotton fields when I was an agro in Moree. The year after, when GM cotton came in, that was reduced to 3. So this continual evolution, making it better and better from a waterway, from an animal welfare viewpoint, from an environmental viewpoint, from a soil viewpoint, is core DNA for agribusiness. And I think that's part of the issue that we may need to communicate more, but it kind of doesn't matter, because as long as the outcome's there, it's fine. If I think the in the 2000s, I was chair of CropLife and AgSafe. In 2000, we said, you know what? There's now that we've replaced conservation tillage with the roundups and paraquats of the world, etc. There's so many drums on farm. There are drums everywhere, and then you see some of these drums with S7 poisons cut in half and used as watering cans for pigs, and you go, no, this is just wrong. So we put in place. In fact, I was one of the signatory from those two bodies for drum muster, which you may have heard of. Since then, we've had something like 60 million recycled drums out of regional rural Australia. And so this record, I can't see any reason why the past record of innovation, sustainability, productivity improvements, all wrapped together, can't continue. So the next slide. An interesting one of looking at each of the commodities, because agriculture is largely at a pre-farm gate level, is largely run on a commodity basis. So by eggs or dairy, and you can see the community issues by commodity, and it's and again not surprising, broad-based concerns, some differences by commodities. Will talked about the methane issue in cattle, and there are other issues. There's runoff in sugar. It just goes. There are issues across the board that are well understood, but all areas have to be front of mind. And some are causes. We can see climate change, greenhouse gas effect across all of them, which probably doesn't surprise anyone. But the old story of when does an alcoholic stop being an alcoholic? When they look in the mirror and say, I'm an alcoholic, I've got to do something. So from an industry viewpoint, we're very, very well aware of multiple areas that we need to get better and better and better. And coupling it, as I keep saying, coupling it, sustainability with profitability and productivity. So there's no chain having to be dragged along. It's actually all makes good sense. So we go to the next slide. On the next slide, this is an interesting one. This is a case study in the egg industry of being able to change views on people's views on various issues in agriculture, and it's really something that a lot of people in ag think we should spend more time showing facts and demonstrating what's really truly happening. And my sense is I'd rather spend time on fixing the problems and then moving and fixing the next problem. But quite interesting, because there was a positive outcome in this case. So the next slide. Our self-assessment, so again, the alcoholic analogy, you can see supply chain partners in blue, agribusiness industry group, major producers in that orange colour, and with the left hand axis, the coordinate action and progress and degree of trust. And you can see the observations from that, if you kind of just dwell on it for a moment. We know that we've got a way to go, and we know there's room to move. Which again, I think is a positive thing. An industry like cotton moved very, very quickly. Why? Because if it didn't, it wouldn't exist anymore. If you have fish floating up in rivers all over the place, vineyards dying with overspray, etc., it just won't exist anymore. And they moved a long time ago. So next slide. So the priorities, as identified by all of the respondents in this research a couple of years ago. You see number one priority down the bottom, climate change, energy efficiency, etc. But it is amongst a bunch of issues, and they're all interrelated and interlocked. So next slide. So I think this is the deepest insight I got from this research study, was that when we look at all the community expectations and agribusiness expectations, I had thought that they were light years apart. But what the research showed was that metropolitan people and regional rural agricultural people actually have the same views, the same concerns, exactly the same worries. The fundamental difference is that metropolitan people want all these changes to respond to climate change to happen, and the other sustainability issues and ESG issues, they want to change tomorrow because they largely don't have skin in the game. And regional rural communities and agribusiness wants to have a smooth transition that allows for communities to stay alive, for farms to stay alive, to families to be able to feed themselves. And so there's just a different nuance. Like if you've got skin in the game, you have a different view to if you haven't got skin in the game. So next slide. And the insights that we drew out of the multiple drivers I've talked about. It's not about should this be something that one day we get up to and start raising to the challenge. Jason will be talking soon, and the 2030 beef red meat commitment is an example of a few years ago. The grains industry sustainability frameworks another example. I mean, across the board, ag is well onto it and looking how to ensure that we're ahead of the game so that there's a smooth transition, which allows communities to stay together, that gives us sustainability outcomes we want. And then the final slide around climate change credentials, and the question Laura and Will put to me, do we think it can be? Absolutely 100%. And the balance of effort needs to be in the doing, all the initiatives that are in place across all the commodities. The group of CEOs on Tuesday wanted a consistent overarching umbrella approach, while each of our companies, as Will demonstrated with Coles, each of our companies are doing stuff now, and Costa, we saw that as well. We're doing stuff, but an overarching approach is critical in order to claim this position. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Very good. Okay, a couple of questions for you. Thanks so much for that fantastic presentation, Mark. So thinking about climate risk, and you showed the ESG priority issues there, and climate change was the number one response from respondents there, the top priority. Are we ready? Are we doing enough? Do you feel that we'll be ready to be able to respond to climate risks as and when they continue to present themselves?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because the dimension of this discussion that I think is so important is the time horizon. So if we all believe in this room that tomorrow the temperature is going to go up 20 degrees and everything's going to dry up, then no, we're not ready. If we believe there's an incremental aspect to this, then I think we will be overwhelmingly ready. And that's the debate. We debated around a lot in the risk committee around, well, what is the timeline? If it's like in 100 years, the data I saw on frost periods in New South Wales, over 100 years, frost periods moved 15 days for winter crops. So are we ready? Well, in that period, we've got crops, we've got genetics of crops that have been bred that flower earlier, so they're not flowering when it's frost. We've also got different geographical areas because of our other technologies that are in place, and we can plant later, we can harvest earlier. So there are a lot of mitigating options. So that it's an interesting point that the time horizon. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. Because the time horizon is something that we debate a lot. If your sense is that it's incremental, yes, we will. If your sense is that it's traumatic and dramatic and short term, no, we aren't.
Great, thanks, Mark. 40 years in the industry, and obviously a lot to do with the China-Australia relations and the market over there as well. Thinking about the Agribusiness Australia 2030 vision, what are the opportunities to extend the impact? We talk about being world leading. What are the opportunities to extend that impact to the China agribusiness and agri sector?
In terms of the growth being in China, or in terms of China adopting?
The latter. So in terms of supporting China with its aspirations and objectives.
Again, my views are probably not a common view. I have great confidence and pride in the initiatives that China has in place. I think having seen in the ag chemical side of our industry, the progress that I've seen made over the last 20 years is outstanding. And even the short-term progress in terms of the mindfulness of the combinations that I'm talking about, of transitions and changes, I think are outstanding. Across the broader industry, I think it's probably more of a political question, but I actually have deep confidence.
Fantastic. That's excellent. A question from the audience on Slido. So does Agribusiness Australia have plans to invest in the commercialisation of Australian Indigenous products?
Agribusiness Australia wouldn't, but we're more, because it's a forum association, not a commercial entity, but we would encourage connecting parties together. And again, from experience in the Pilbara, the Kimberley, Northern Territory, and where I come from in far north Queensland. I mean, there are multiple opportunities. There are multiple opportunities, and I think having capital available, but also having a without having an ecosystem that actually appreciates the value that can be created. I think so. We're more than happy to facilitate people together.
Fantastic. And then one last question back to China. So, what's the one thing, if you could think, the one thing that we could collaborate on between Australia and China in agribusiness and sustainability to achieve net zero faster? What would that be?
So yeah, another really good question. You know, a lot of our options have been taken away with the reduction of Chinese foreign investment in Australia, in land development. A lot of these options that were moving along quite nicely have been taken away. In terms of genetics, I mean, there's real sovereign risk now flowing through some of the genetics discussions, so that's kind of been taken away as well. I think maybe I won't have an answer for that question. You know, it's always been a great relationship between Australia and China at a commercial level. The example of, you know, any relationship needing the three legs to the stool, so it's the kind of commercial, the personal and the government, and so we've got two legs, right?
Very good. Thank you, Mark. On that note, I'd like to ask for a round of applause again for your time with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. It's an absolute honour to have someone of your standing to present today. So we really appreciate your time and your sharing your expertise with us. So thank you again.